Hey everyone, welcome back. So did you see my last video that I posted on Wednesday? If you missed that, here's a link and it's also in the description below. So pop back here when you've finished watching that. Now for everyone else, you might remember that I said last time that I had some mixed media projects planned for this Gelli printed paper. Well, here's my first project and I'm hoping that it will inspire you and give you some ideas to play with for your next Gelli print project. I'm taking this sketch from my Inktober sketchbook as my starting point for today's project. Now, I don't think I mentioned in my Inktober sketchbook tour just how fascinated I am by these little scenes. So I did a couple of them over Inktober, and this is the first one that I did. And I thought I'd revisit it and just see what else I could do with it. The first thing I did was to cut out a background panel for the project from one of the Gelli print papers, and then I used that to cut out a template from just ordinary printer paper. And you can see that I've increased the size from the original drawing. And I don't know if you can quite see here, but I've actually marked out the panel into thirds to help me transfer the image across to this new panel and new size. If you look at the original sketch, you can see that it's roughly already in thirds. So those guide marks will give me a good idea of where to position everything. I'm also changing the picture very slightly as I want to add in another hill in the background. Now that I have my sketch transferred onto the paper, I'm going to cut each of the elements out to make templates. Now the foreground hill and that midground hill, now they're easy to cut out as they're just single images, nothing's in front of them, but the background hill has the tree and the house in front of it. Now you could trace them out again and then transfer the tracing onto new paper, that's totally fine and a great way to do it. But as these are just rough templates to guide how I remake the original image, I'm just going to cut out that treetop first, then redraw the background hill on a spare piece of paper before cutting out the tree trunk and the house templates from that original hill. When you have multiple elements like this, it is worth building them up into your image as you go along to check that they're still working for you, and also to keep them all together, because we all know how easy it is to lose something from our work desk, don't we? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've put something down and literally it's vanished. And I've spent hours looking for it. You all know that too, right? That's not just me. Please tell me that's not just me. Another thing you can do is you can put them into an envelope and keep them for later if you need to move on and do something else. And I quite often do that with my paper templates, particularly if I've got a set of them that work together. My templates are ready and it's just a matter of choosing which of those Gelli printed papers to use. For my hills, I'm going to use the mostly green papers, and as I want to give the impression of the hills rolling into the background, I'm going to use the dark to light principle. And that's where the foreground is darkest, and the further the hills are in the distance, the lighter they become. Luckily I have a range of Gelli prints in various green tones, so I'm just picking my favourite textures on those prints and using the templates to roughly cut out the shapes. Now, I'm cutting my shapes slightly larger than the templates because, well, it's easier to trim down than it is to recut. So that just gives me a little bit of wiggle room if I need to change the design as I work. Plus, to build the image, I want to layer the hills, and I only made templates for the bits you can actually see. So I need to make sure that I've got enough paper so that all those hills can sit behind that foreground hill. Another thing to remember when you're doing this is which direction you want that image to be. And it might sound really obvious, but it is very easy to forget and turn your template around to the wrong way. So I don't know if you've noticed how I'm doing it. I line up where I want my template to be on the front of that printed paper. I then move the template to the back, but without turning it around, and use my fingers to guide where I want it to be. Or you can hold it up to a window or a light box. And then I turn both the template and the page over together, so that I can draw around it and cut it out. I've gone more than slightly larger for the tree, as I decided that I wanted both the tree and the house to be a lot bigger than I originally intended, as I thought having those larger would just make a better image. But the templates still work perfectly well. I'm just increasing the size of all the bits. I think you can see now why I wasn't being overly precise with my templates. Sometimes precision is really good, but other times you just need a little bit of flexibility and let the work evolve as you go. And there is still room for this piece to change, even though it was a very planned piece with a specific starting point and end point. So I've got all my cutouts and the picture is starting to come together. Now I just want to add some more colour and details in some of the areas, and to do this I'm going to use some watercolour pencils. And the first area that needs some attention is my tree trunk, as I actually cut this one out from that lightest green paper. So a little watercolour pencil wash will change up the colour on this easily. And I started with a light brown colour and then added a little bit of dark brown detail. And I'm also going to add a little bit of bark detail, so I'm going to take that dark brown pencil and really sharpen it up to a very fine point so that I can then draw in some bark textures on the tree. The watercolour pencils are perfect for adding these types of details to this kind of project, because you can use them just as I'm using them here, as a pencil to add drawings or patterns, or you can rub them over the surface to get that lovely pencil rubbing texture. But then if you want to, you can also blend them out with the water so they match more naturally with the background, or you can use them to add light and shade in this way too. So that's why I decided to use watercolour pencils for this particular job. The roof and the house also got some work to deepen the colours and add shading details and other details to them. And I wanted to add a little shading on the wall under the roof before I stuck the roof down, and that would give the house just a little bit more of a dimensional look. Once these details were done, I could stick the smaller pieces together and start building the picture properly. Have you spotted the bit that I haven't mentioned yet? Well, the keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed that I've now got a little bit of a border around some of my sky, that background panel. I did this with pencil too, in exactly the same way as I showed you with the other items. However, in the end, and you'll see this in a minute, I decided that I didn't like it, so I swapped the sky round to the bit that I hadn't coloured in with pencil. And I thought that looked a lot better. I think if I'd kept that border in, I would have had to have put it on everything. And I was happy to put the detail on the house and on the tree trunk, but I kind of didn't want a border around everything. I wanted the cutout paper to speak for itself. So for some reason I managed to forget to put my windows and door in, so I'm just adding those in with pencil now. And once I've done that, it's a case of slotting all the rest of the hills in place and gluing them down with regular gel, and that's what I'm using here in this project. And I can still fiddle around a little bit with the placement, because I did make sure that I had that little bit of wiggle room by making the hills slightly larger than needed. So I can just make sure that I get everything exactly where I want it before gluing it down. And those windows and doors, they're still not quite dark enough for me, so if I just add a little bit of water to that watercolour pencil, that should darken those up a bit. And then I'll be able to glue down that first hill and the house as well, before going around and trimming off the excess bits that I don't need. So I'm thinking I could turn this into a card, or perhaps a journal page, or maybe just leave it as it is. What about you? What do you think I should do with it? I would love to hear your ideas, so please do let me know. And if you enjoyed my video today, then please do like it and share it with your friends. That would be absolutely marvellous. Thank you very much. I hope you got some useful tips and ideas for your next project. Now I'm going to be back in a few days' time with a new art and craft project to share with you on video. So if you're not already one of my subscribers, it would be just wonderful to have you on board, so come along and subscribe. So until next time folks, have a really creative time, and I'll see you soon.